The deafening crack of a Winchester rifle sent a flock of startled crows scattering into the copper-streaked sky, their black wings flapping frantically against the approaching twilight as Sophia Nelson ducked deeper into the shadows of the weathered barn, her heart pounding so violently she feared it might burst from her chest. Montana Territory, 1878. Sophia pressed her back against the rough-hewn timber wall, willing her ragged breathing to steady. 6 days of running had left her body trembling with exhaustion and hunger. The hem of her once fine blue calico dress was now caked with mud and torn in places where it had caught on brambles during her desperate flight. Her dark auburn hair, once her pride, hung in tangled waves around her face, escaping from the simple braid she'd hastily fashioned before dawn. The barn offered temporary sanctuary, a place to hide while she gathered her strength and plotted her next move. If only her mind would stop replaying the horrors she'd left behind in Helena. The memories crashed over her like violent waves. Vernon Blackwood's enraged face, the glint of his knife in the lamplight, her sister's screams, and blood, so much blood spreading across the floorboards of what should have been a safe haven. "He'll never stop looking," she whispered to herself, sinking down onto a pile of hay, her trembling fingers tracing the fading bruise on her cheek. "Not until I'm dead." Unknown to Sophia, watchful eyes had been tracking her movements since she'd stumbled onto the property an hour earlier. Wade O'Malley stood perfectly still in the shadow of the hayloft, one hand resting on the worn leather holster at his hip, the other holding the barn's wooden support beam. 29 years of hard living had taught him to observe before acting, and something about the frightened woman below stirred both his curiosity and caution. Wade had seen his share of desperate folk in his years working this land, but something about this woman seemed different. She moved like a hunted animal, checking corners, listening for sounds beyond the settling creaks of the old barn. Whoever she was running from had put genuine fear in her eyes that, even in the dim light filtering through the barn's weathered slats, he could see were the color of summer sage. He shifted his weight slightly, and a loose floorboard groaned beneath his boot. Sophia froze, her eyes darting upward. "Who's there?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, but the tremor in it was unmistakable. Wade made a split-second decision. "Just the owner of this barn you decided to occupy, madam." He kept his voice deliberately gentle as he moved toward the ladder, descending with measured steps. Sophia scrambled backward, fumbling in her worn leather satchel until her fingers closed around the small derringer her father had given her before she'd left Virginia 4 years ago. She pointed it toward the descending figure, her hand shaking visibly. "Stay back," she warned, trying to inject steel into her voice. "I don't want trouble, but I'll defend myself if needed." Wade stepped into a shaft of fading sunlight, his hands raised slightly to show he meant no harm. He stood over 6 feet tall, his frame lean but solid from years of ranch work. A week's growth of beard shadowed his jawline, and deep lines around his eyes spoke of long days under the relentless western sun. His dark brown Stetson was pushed back slightly, revealing eyes the color of weathered turquoise. "That little gun looks more dangerous to you than me, the way your hand's shaking," he observed, not unkindly. "I don't make war on women, no matter how uninvited their visit might be." "I'll be gone by morning," Sophia promised, the derringer still pointed at him, though her arm was beginning to ache with the effort of holding it steady. "I just needed somewhere to rest." Wade's eyes moved over her face, noting the fading bruise on her cheekbone, the dark shadows beneath her eyes, the way her collarbones protruded beneath her dress. Whatever her story was, it clearly involved hunger and harm. "You look like you could use more than rest," he said, taking a careful step forward. "When's the last time you ate something proper?" The mention of food made Sophia's stomach clench painfully. She couldn't remember her last real meal. The few coins she'd had were spent on stale bread 2 days ago. Pride warred with desperate hunger as she lowered the derringer slightly. "I don't accept charity," she said, her voice brittle. Wade's mouth curved in a hint of a smile. Good thing I'm not offering any, then. I need help with supper. My usual cook rode into town and won't be back until tomorrow. You help with the meal, you earn your keep for the night. That's business, not charity. Sophia hesitated, studying his face for signs of deception. In her experience, men rarely offered something for nothing, and those who appeared kind often had the darkest intentions. But there was something in Wade O'Malley's weathered face that didn't match the predators she'd known. His eyes held steady on hers, patient and clear. Her stomach growled audibly, making the decision for her. She slipped the derringer back into her satchel and straightened her shoulders. I can cook, she said simply. Wade nodded. Then follow me to the house. And you might want to tell me your name, seeing as you'll be handling my food. A moment's hesitation. Sophia, she offered, deliberately withholding her surname. Just Sophia. Well, just Sophia, he said, the faintest hint of amusement warming his voice. I'm Wade O'Malley. This is Cottonwood Ranch, and you're welcome to a night's rest and food in exchange for your help. After that, whatever you're running from is your business. The mention of running made Sophia stiffen, but Wade had already turned toward the barn door, his long strides carrying him into the dusky evening light. After a moment's hesitation, she followed, clutching her satchel to her chest like a shield. The main house stood about 100 yards from the barn, a substantial two-story structure built of timber and stone, with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. It spoke of permanence and prosperity, without ostentation. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, promising warmth against the coming night's chill. As they approached, Sophia noticed other buildings clustered nearby: a bunkhouse, a smokehouse, another smaller barn. In the distance, fenced pastures stretched toward the purpling shadows of mountains. This was no small operation, which meant there would be ranch hands nearby. The thought of more people, more men seeing her made Sophia's steps falter. Wade noticed her hesitation and paused at the bottom of the porch steps. The hands eat at the bunkhouse, he said, accurately reading her concern. Just you and me in the main house tonight. That revelation brought its own kind of worry, but Sophia was too exhausted to contemplate another night outdoors with no food and the constant fear of discovery. She nodded once and followed him up the steps. The interior of the house surprised her. She'd expected the Spartan quarters of a bachelor rancher, perhaps a table, a few chairs, the basics of survival. Instead, the main room was comfortably furnished with well-crafted pieces that spoke of care and attention. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with leather-bound volumes. A large stone fireplace dominated another wall, with a fire already burning low. Braided rugs softened the hardwood floors, and oil lamps cast a warm glow throughout the space. Your wife has a gift for making a house comfortable, Sophia observed, setting her satchel down carefully beside a high-backed chair. No wife, Wade replied, hanging his hat on a rack near the door. My mother had the gift. She passed 5 years ago, but I haven't had the heart to change much. He gestured toward a doorway at the rear of the room. Kitchens through there. Pantries well stocked. Sophia followed him into a large kitchen dominated by a cast-iron stove and a sturdy oak table. A pump at the sink promised fresh water, and the pantry, when Wade opened it, revealed an impressive array of provisions. I'll leave you to it, he said. Need to check on a matter with my foreman. I'll be back in half an hour. When he'd gone, Sophia allowed herself a moment to simply breathe. The kitchen was warm and clean, the pantry better stocked than many she'd seen even in prosperous homes. For the first time in nearly a week, she felt the iron bands of terror around her chest loosen slightly. She washed her hands at the pump, then examined the pantry's offerings. Soon, she had bacon sizzling in a cast-iron skillet, potatoes sliced and ready to fry, and biscuit dough mixed and waiting. It felt strangely normal to be working in a kitchen again, using her hands for something other than clinging to the sides of freight wagons or warding off threats. By the time Wade returned, The kitchen was filled with savory aromas, and the table was set with 2 plates. "Smells like heaven," he said, removing his work gloves and washing his hands at the pump. Been a while since these walls held cooking smells this good. Sophia felt an unexpected flush of pleasure at the compliment. "It's simple fare," she said, transferring golden brown biscuits to a cloth-lined basket. "But filling." They ate in relative silence, the clinking of utensils against plates the only sound for several minutes. Sophia tried not to devour her food too quickly, but hunger overrode her manners. Wade said nothing about her appetite, simply pushing the biscuit basket closer to her when she'd emptied her plate. "You cook like that. You could find work in any decent establishment in the territory," he observed finally, leaning back in his chair with a cup of coffee. "No need to be sleeping in strangers' barns." Sophia stiffened, her fork pausing halfway to her mouth. "I told you I'll be gone by morning." Wade studied her over the rim of his coffee cup. "And where will you go? Next barn? Next town? How far do you need to run?" "That's not your concern," she said, setting her fork down with a deliberate calm she didn't feel. "No, it isn't," he agreed easily. "But if you're running from the law, I should know what I'm harboring. And if you're running from something else." His eyes flickered to the fading bruise on her cheek. "Well, that might be a different matter." Sophia's hand rose unconsciously to her face, fingers hovering over the yellowing mark. "I'm not a criminal," she said softly, "and I don't want to bring trouble to your door. It's best if I just move on." Wade set his cup down. "My foreman tells me there's been talk in town. A man's been asking questions about a woman matching your description, offering money for information." Ice flooded Sophia's veins. Vernon had found her trail faster than she'd expected. She pushed back from the table, her mind already calculating escape routes. "I need to go," she said, reaching for her satchel.
"Now."
Wade remained seated, his expression calm. Middle of the night in mountain country isn't the time to be traveling alone, especially not with someone hunting you. The barn's the first place they'd look. "I've got a better idea." Sophia paused, suspicion warring with desperate need for a safe haven. "What idea?" "I've got a line cabin about 10 miles north of here, up in the foothills. Use it during roundup sometimes, or when the winter herds need checking. No one would think to look for you there, and it's stocked with enough provisions to last weeks." "Why would you help me?" Sophia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know me. I could be lying about everything." Wade's weathered face remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes, something that might have been compassion, or memory, or both. "My sister Caroline," he said finally, "ran from a man who put worse marks on her than the one on your cheek. Found her too, because good people who might have helped her were too afraid to get involved in domestic matters." His mouth tightened. "She's been in the ground 15 years now." The simple statement hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken grief. Sophia felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "I'm sorry about your sister," she said quietly. "But my situation, it's complicated. Dangerous. This man, he's not just anyone. He has connections, money, influence." "Most bullies do," Wade replied. "Makes them harder to stand against, but not impossible." He stood up, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. "I'm riding to the line cabin tonight, with or without you. Your choice if you want to come along." Sophia stared at him, weighing her options. She had precious few of them. If Vernon's men were already asking questions in town, her time was running out. This stranger was offering safety, at least temporarily. And something in his eyes, in the story of his sister, made her want to trust him despite years of learning that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. "When do we leave?" she asked finally. "As soon as you're ready. Pack some food from the pantry while I saddle the horses." 20 minutes later, Sophia found herself atop a gentle bay mare, following Wade's broader silhouette through the darkness. They rode in silence, The only sounds the rhythmic creaking of leather saddles and the soft thudding of hooves against the earth. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamond dust across the velvet sky, the waning moon providing just enough light to illuminate the trail. The 10-mile journey took them through stands of pine and aspen, across a shallow creek, and gradually upward into the foothills. Sophia's body ached from days of hard travel, but she kept pace, determined not to show weakness. By the time they reached the Line cabin, nestled in a small clearing backed by towering pines, her hands were numb from gripping the reins, and her legs trembled with fatigue. Wade dismounted first, then approached to help her down. His hands were strong and sure at her waist, supporting her weight as her stiff legs threatened to buckle beneath her. For a brief moment, they stood close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could see the silvery strands among the brown in his beard. Then he stepped back, respectful of boundaries neither had acknowledged aloud. The cabin was small but solidly built, with a stone chimney and a small covered porch. Inside, it was spare but clean, a single room containing a wooden table with 2 chairs, a stone fireplace, a narrow bed in one corner, and a cupboard that presumably held supplies. A coal oil lamp hung from a ceiling beam, which Wade lit immediately. "It's not fancy," he said, setting her satchel on the table, "but it's warm and dry, and no one will find you here without trying mighty hard." Sophia stood in the center of the small space, suddenly overwhelmed by the kindness of this stranger and the precariousness of her situation. Exhaustion, fear, and relief collided within her, bringing unexpected tears to her eyes. She blinked them back furiously, unwilling to appear any weaker than she already had. Wade pretended not to notice her emotion, busying himself with starting a fire in the small fireplace. "There's jerky and beans in the cupboard," he said, his back to her. "Coffee, too. Water barrel outside is full, creeks just down the slope if you need more." "Thank you," Sophia said, the words wholly inadequate for what he was offering. "I don't know how I'll repay you." Wade straightened, dusting his hands on his trousers as the kindling caught and flames began to lick at the larger logs. "No debt between us," he said simply. "I'll ride back at first light, safer for both of us, if I'm not missing from the ranch when your pursuer comes calling." The thought of being alone again sent a shiver of fear through Sophia. "Will they believe you? If they ask questions?" Wade's mouth curved in a humorless smile. "I've got a reputation for speaking plain and minding my own business. Most folks take me at my word." He moved toward the door. "I'll check on the horses, then bed down on the porch for what's left of the night." "You can't sleep outside," Sophia protested. "It's your cabin." "And you're my guest," he countered. "I've slept under worse conditions than a roof over my head and the stars for company. I'll be fine." Before she could argue further, he was gone, the door closing quietly behind him. Sophia stood in the center of the small cabin, the fire's warmth beginning to thaw her chilled limbs. She looked at the narrow bed with its wool blankets and realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd slept on anything softer than hay or hard ground. Exhaustion overtook her in waves. She barely managed to remove her boots before collapsing onto the bed, pulling a blanket over her still-clothed body. The last thing she registered before sleep claimed her was the distant sound of Wade's deep voice, murmuring to the horses outside. Morning arrived with pale golden light filtering through the cabin's single window. For a moment, Sophia was disoriented, the unfamiliar surroundings triggering a flash of panic before memory returned. She sat up slowly, her body stiff from days of hard travel but refreshed from the first real sleep she'd had in nearly a week. The cabin was empty, the fire reduced to glowing embers. Sophia rose and moved to the window, peering out at the small clearing. Wade was already awake, tending to the horses. He moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to physical labor, his broad shoulders flexing beneath his shirt as he lifted a saddle onto his gelding. Watching him, Sophia felt a curious mixture of gratitude and wariness. In her 24 years, she'd learned that kindness from men often came with hidden costs. Yet everything about Wade O'Malley suggested a straightforward decency that was increasingly rare in her experience. She quickly washed her face in the basin by the door, combed her fingers through her tangled hair, and pinched some color into her pale cheeks. It was ridiculous to care about her appearance in these circumstances, yet some vestige of her former self, the young woman who'd once attended socials and church gatherings with careful attention to her presentation, asserted itself. When Wade entered a few minutes later, she was stoking the fire back to life. "Morning," he said, removing his hat. "Sleep well?" Sophia nodded. "Better than I have in days. Thank you." Wade set a small bundle on the table. "Brought some provisions from my saddlebags. Biscuits from last night, some jerky, dried apples. Should hold you until I can bring more supplies. You're coming back?" Sophia couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. "Course I am," he replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world to continue helping a stranger who'd brought potential danger to his doorstep. "Can't leave you up here indefinitely with no supplies or protection." "I can't ask you to risk yourself further," Sophia said, straightening her shoulders. "You've already done more than enough." Wade's expression remained impassive, but his eyes held a glint of something that might have been amusement. "Don't recall you asking the first time either. Some things a man does because they need doing." He settled his hat back on his head. "I'll return tomorrow evening with more provisions. Stay close to the cabin. There's a rifle above the door if you need it, though I don't expect trouble this far out." Sophia wanted to protest further, to release him from whatever obligation he felt toward her, but the words died in her throat. The truth was, she needed his help. Without it, Vernon would eventually find her, and the consequences didn't bear contemplating. "Thank you," she said instead, the words inadequate but sincere. Wade nodded once, then turned to leave. At the door he paused. "Your full name," he said without turning around. "Might be useful to know it, in case I need to get word to you quickly." Sophia hesitated. Giving her real name was dangerous. Vernon had connections throughout the territory, and the name Nelson might be known. But this man was risking himself to help her. She owed him at least a measure of truth. "Nelson," she said finally. "Sophia Nelson." Wade glanced back at her, something unreadable flickering across his weathered features. "Rest easy, Miss Nelson," he said quietly. "You're safe here." Then he was gone, the sound of hoofbeats gradually fading as he descended the trail toward his ranch. Sophia stood in the doorway until long after he disappeared from view, wondering what strange twist of fate had brought her to this man's barn on this particular night, and whether she dared hope that her luck had finally changed. The day passed slowly, each hour stretching into the next with little to mark their passing. Sophia explored the small cabin thoroughly, familiarizing herself with its meager contents. Besides the furniture she'd already noted, the cupboard contained basic cooking implements, several cans of beans, coffee, flour, sugar, salt, and dried beef. A shelf held 3 books, a Bible, a collection of Shakespeare's works, and a practical manual on animal husbandry. She smiled at the eclectic selection, wondering if they reflected Wade's own interests or were simply what happened to be available when the cabin was stocked. The thought of him reading Shakespeare by lamplight in this remote cabin created an image at odds with his rugged exterior, yet somehow fitting. After eating a small meal of the provisions he'd left, Sophia ventured outside, staying close to the cabin as instructed. The setting was beautiful, the small clearing surrounded by tall pines, with a view of distant mountains to the west. The air was crisp and clean, scented with pine resin and wild sage. In different circumstances, she might have found it peaceful, even restorative. But peace eluded her. Every snapping twig, every rustle of leaves sent her heart racing with fear that Vernon's men had somehow tracked her to this remote sanctuary. By mid-afternoon, she'd retreated back inside, the rifle from above the door laid across her lap as she sat beside the window, watching the trail. As the shadows lengthened and dusk approached, Sophia's anxiety intensified. What if Wade didn't return? What if Vernon had found him, forced him to reveal her location? What if he'd simply decided that helping her wasn't worth the risk? She was pacing the small confines of the cabin, these thoughts circling like vultures in her mind, when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Grabbing the rifle, she positioned herself beside the window, her finger trembling near the trigger. Relief flooded through her when Wade's familiar silhouette appeared on the trail, leading a pack horse behind his gelding. She set the rifle aside and moved to the door, stepping out onto the small porch as he dismounted. "Any trouble?" she asked, searching his face for signs of concern. Wade shook his head, leading both horses to the small lean-to at the side of the cabin. "Not the kind you're worried about. Your pursuer hasn't shown himself yet, but there's talk in town of strangers asking questions." Sophia's stomach tightened. What kind of questions? The usual. Whether anyone's seen a woman traveling alone, auburn hair, green eyes, about your height. Wade began unloading supplies from the pack horse, sacks of flour and sugar, coffee, bacon, potatoes, several cans of peaches, and a small crate of fresh eggs carefully packed in straw. Said she was a missing wife, which raised fewer eyebrows than it should have. Men lose their wives out here with disappointing regularity. "He's not my husband," Sophia said quickly, accepting a sack of potatoes from him. "Vernon Blackwood never had any claim on me, legal or otherwise." The name slipped out before she could stop it, and she froze, horrified at having revealed even this much. But Wade merely nodded, continuing to unload supplies. "Good to know," he said. "Makes helping you sit easier on my conscience, though I figured as much from the start." They worked in companionable silence, transferring the supplies into the cabin and arranging them in the cupboard. Wade had brought far more than Sophia had expected, enough food to last several weeks, as well as practical items like soap, matches, candles, and even a small bundle of fabric and sewing notions. "I wasn't sure what you might need," he explained, looking almost embarrassed as she unwrapped the fabric, a length of serviceable blue cotton and another of softer muslin. Asked Mrs. Townsend at the general store what a lady might require if she were staying at a remote cabin for a spell. She was curious, but discreet. Sophia ran her fingers over the fabric, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. Her own dress was showing the effects of her hasty flight, torn in places, stained with dirt and sweat. The chance to fashion something clean and whole seemed an unexpected luxury. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. I don't know why you're being so kind, but I'm grateful." Wade busied himself with stacking firewood near the hearth, his back to her. "Told you my reasons," he said gruffly. "No need to keep thanking me." But Sophia suspected there was more to his generosity than the memory of his sister. Wade O'Malley was a complex man, his rough exterior concealing depths she was only beginning to glimpse. She set about preparing a proper meal, grateful for the chance to repay his kindness in even this small way. The cabin filled with the aroma of frying bacon and potatoes, fresh coffee brewing on the small iron stove. When they sat down to eat, the simple fare seemed like a feast after days of deprivation. "Will you tell me what brought you to my barn?" Wade asked after they'd eaten in silence for several minutes. "You don't strike me as a woman who'd run without serious cause." Sophia set her fork down, appetite suddenly diminished. The question wasn't unexpected, but answering it meant revisiting horrors she'd been trying to suppress. "It's not a pleasant story," she warned. Wade's eyes met hers across the table, steady and unflinching. "Few true stories are, in my experience." Sophia took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I came west 4 years ago, after my parents died of influenza within weeks of each other. There was a cousin in Helena who offered to take me in, not out of kindness, I later realized, but because my father had left me a modest inheritance that he coveted." She paused, remembering the bitter disappointment of discovering Cousin Edith's true nature. When the money was gone, so was her welcome. I found work as a seamstress in a dress shop owned by a widow named Mrs. Fletcher. It was decent work, and I had a small room above the shop. I was content, if not happy. Wade listened silently, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts. 6 months ago, Vernon Blackwood started coming to the shop. He's a wealthy man, owns half the businesses in Helena, or so they say. He ordered shirts, vests, demanded I personally handle his fittings. Sophia's voice faltered. At first, I was flattered by his attention. He was handsome, prosperous, seemingly cultured. When he began courting me, bringing gifts, inviting me to dine at the hotel restaurant, it seemed like something from a storybook. She laughed bitterly. I was so naive. I mistook his possessiveness for devotion, his control for concern. By the time I saw the truth of his nature, I was already trapped in his web. What happened? Wade asked quietly when she fell silent. My younger sister Nancy arrived unexpectedly from Virginia. Our parents' death had left her in the care of a maternal aunt, but when the aunt remarried, there was no place for Nancy in the new household. She was barely 18, beautiful, innocent. Sophia's voice caught. Vernon noticed her immediately. Wade's hand tightened around his coffee cup, knuckles widening, but he remained silent. I tried to end things with him then, to protect her. That's when I discovered what he truly was. The charming mask dropped, revealing something monstrous beneath. Sophia touched the fading bruise on her cheek unconsciously. This was just the beginning. He threatened to ruin me, to ensure I'd never find work in Helena again. When that didn't persuade me, he threatened Nancy. The memories were so vivid they seemed to fill the small cabin. Vernon's face contorted with rage, the sickening crack of his hand against her cheek, Nancy's terrified eyes watching from the corner. We tried to leave quietly in the night. Had tickets for the eastbound stage, planned to return to Virginia, consequences be damned. Sophia closed her eyes, the next part almost too painful to voice. Vernon's men were waiting. There was a struggle. Nancy tried to defend me, and her voice broke. There was a knife. So much blood. I don't even know if she survived. Tears slid down her cheeks, unchecked. I ran. Like a coward, I ran while my sister lay bleeding. Vernon's men pursued me, but I managed to slip away in the confusion. I've been running ever since, hiding during the day, traveling at night, terrified with every step that they'd find me and finish what they started. The cabin was silent save for the crackling of the fire and Sophia's ragged breathing as she fought to control her tears. She couldn't look at Wade, didn't want to see judgment or, worse, pity in his eyes. When his hand covered hers on the table, she flinched in surprise. His palm was calloused from years of ranch work, but his touch was gentle. "You're not a coward," he said, his voice low and fierce. "You survived. And now you're going to keep surviving, until we can figure out how to make you safe for good." Sophia looked up, startled by the determination in his voice and the use of we instead of you. Wade's eyes held steady on hers, reflecting the firelight, and something else, a resolve that should have frightened her, but instead kindled a small, dangerous flicker of hope. "Vernon won't stop," she whispered. "He can't afford to. If what he did to Nancy and me became known. Men like Blackwood survive because people are afraid to stand against them," Wade said, his hand still covering hers. "But they're not invincible. No man is." There was something in his tone that suggested personal knowledge of this truth, but before Sophia could question it, he withdrew his hand and stood up. "It's getting late," he said. "I should head back to the ranch before full dark." Disappointment washed through Sophia at the thought of being alone again, but she nodded, understanding the necessity. "When will you return?" "Day after tomorrow," Wade replied, reaching for his hat. "Sooner if there's news you should know." At the door, he paused, turning back to her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Bolt the door behind me," he instructed. "And remember the rifle if needed. You're stronger than you believe, Sophia Nelson." The sound of her name on his lips sent an unexpected warmth through her, at odds with the fear that had been her constant companion for days. She nodded, following him to the door and watching as he mounted his gelding. "Be careful," she called softly as he turned the horse toward the trail. Wade touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement, then disappeared into the gathering darkness, leaving Sophia alone with her thoughts and the faint, unfamiliar sensation of hope beginning to take root beneath her breastbone. The next day passed more quickly than the first. Sophia kept herself occupied with practical tasks, cleaning the already tidy cabin, taking inventory of the supplies Wade had brought, and beginning work on a simple dress from the fabric he'd provided. The familiar rhythm of measuring, cutting, and stitching soothed her frayed nerves and gave her mind respite from the constant cycle of fear and memory. By the time Wade returned the following evening, she had completed a serviceable dress of the blue cotton and was wearing it when she greeted him at the door. His eyes widened slightly at the transformation, taking in her cleaner appearance and the way the new garment complemented her auburn hair and green eyes. "You look," he began, then cleared his throat. "The dress suits you." Sophia felt her cheeks warm at the simple compliment. "Thank you for the fabric. It was thoughtful of you." Wade nodded, looking almost embarrassed, and turned his attention to unloading several packages from his saddlebags. "Brought the Helena newspaper," he said, handing her a folded paper. "Thought you might want to see if there's any news that concerns you." Sophia's heart raced as she unfolded the paper with trembling fingers. The front page held no mention of Nancy or Vernon Blackwood, but on page 3, a small article caught her eye. "Society matron wounded in home invasion misses." Edith Nelson of Helena is recovering from injuries sustained during an apparent robbery attempt at her Pine Street residence last week. Her young ward, Miss Nancy Nelson, who was also injured in the incident, remains in serious condition at St. Peter's Hospital. Authorities are seeking information on the whereabouts of Mrs. Nelson's cousin, Miss Sophia Nelson, who may have witnessed the attack. Sophia's knees buckled, and she sank onto a chair, the paper clutched in her white, knuckled grip. "She's alive," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. "Nancy's alive." Wade moved to her side, his presence solid and reassuring. "What else does it say?" "They're claiming it was a robbery," Sophia said, disbelief coloring her voice. "Vernon's twisted everything, made me sound like a fugitive witness instead of his victim. And Cousin Edith, she wasn't even there that night. She must be working with him." "Powerful men create their own version of the truth," Wade said grimly. "And newspapers print what they're told, especially when advertising revenue is at stake." Sophia looked up at him, sudden realization dawning. "You need to stay away from me," she said urgently. "If they're publicly searching for me now, anyone associated with me is in danger. Vernon won't hesitate to silence anyone who helps me." Wade's expression hardened. "I've faced worse threats than a city businessman with delusions of grandeur." "You don't understand," Sophia insisted. "Vernon Blackwood isn't just wealthy. He's ruthless. There are rumors about others who crossed him, competitors who suffered mysterious accidents, women who disappeared after rejecting his advances. I dismissed them as gossip until I saw the truth of him myself." "All the more reason you shouldn't face him alone," Wade countered. He took the newspaper from her hands and set it aside. "But that's a discussion for another day. Right now you need to eat, and then we need to talk about your sister." Sophia allowed herself to be guided to the table, where Wade laid out the meal he'd brought: cold chicken, bread, cheese, and a jar of preserved peaches. She ate mechanically, her mind racing with implications of the newspaper article. Nancy was alive but seriously injured. Vernon was publicly searching for her under the guise of seeking a witness. And Cousin Edith, who had never shown Sophia anything but cold disdain since the inheritance money ran out, was somehow involved. "I need to get to Nancy," she said finally, setting down her fork. "She's alone and vulnerable. If Vernon realizes, she could identify him as her attacker when she recovers. Rushing into Helena now would be walking straight into his trap," Wade pointed out. "We need more information and a plan."
"We,"
Sophia challenged, though part of her clung to that word like a lifeline. "This isn't your fight, Wade." "Maybe not," he acknowledged, "but I'm making it mine." Their eyes met across the table, and something shifted in the air between them, an unspoken recognition of boundaries being crossed, of involvement deepening beyond simple charity or obligation. Wade broke the moment first, rising to clear the remains of their meal. "I know a man in Helena," he said. "Former ranger, now works as a private investigator of sorts. Owes me a favor from years back. I could send him to check on your sister, gather information about Blackwood's movements." Hope and fear warred within Sophia. Would he be discreet? Vernon has eyes everywhere. "Marcus Fletcher is the most careful man I know," Wade assured her. "Served as a scout during the war, learned to move unseen when it mattered most. If anyone can navigate Helena without raising suspicions, it's him." Sophia stilled. "Fletcher? Any relation to Mrs. Eleanor Fletcher, who owns the dress shop?" Wade looked surprised. "His mother, I believe." "Why?" "She was my employer," Sophia said, "and one of the few people in Helena who showed me genuine kindness. If Marcus is her son, perhaps he can make contact with her. She might know more about what happened after I fled." "I'll include that in my message," Wade promised. "I'll ride into town tomorrow and send a telegram. With luck, we'll have some answers within days." The "we" again, Sophia noted, and this time didn't challenge it. Strange how quickly she'd come to rely on this man she barely knew, to trust in his steady presence and quiet strength. In different circumstances, such dependence would have alarmed her. Now, it felt like the only solid ground in a world turned treacherous beneath her feet. As Wade prepared to leave for the night, Sophia found herself reluctant to see him go. The cabin, which had felt like a sanctuary during the day, suddenly seemed isolated and vulnerable in the gathering darkness. "Will you be careful?" she asked, standing in the doorway as he mounted his gelding. "If Vernon's men are looking for me, they might be watching local ranches, questioning people." Wade's expression softened slightly. "Been taking care of myself for a long time, Sophia. Don't waste worry on me." But as she watched him disappear down the trail, worry was exactly what tightened her chest and quickened her breath. Not just for herself now, but for this man who had inexplicably placed himself between her and danger. The realization was unsettling. She couldn't afford emotional attachments, not now, perhaps not ever again. Her focus needed to remain on survival and, somehow, securing Nancy's safety. Anything else was a dangerous distraction. Yet as she bolted the cabin door and prepared for another night alone, Sophia found herself thinking not of Vernon Blackwood's threats or Nancy's uncertain fate, but of weathered hands gentle on hers and eyes the color of the summer sky that had offered not pity, but understanding. 3 days passed before Wade returned, the longest he'd been away since bringing Sophia to the Line cabin. By the time she heard hoofbeats on the trail late on the third afternoon, anxiety had driven her to the edge of endurance. She'd imagined countless scenarios, each worse than the last. Wade captured by Vernon's men, forced to reveal her location, Wade deciding the risk of helping her was too great, Wade lying injured somewhere, unable to return or send word. The relief that flooded through her at the sight of him riding into the clearing was so intense it nearly buckled her knees. She stepped onto the porch, shading her eyes against the late afternoon sun, cataloging his appearance for signs of trouble. He looked tired, with dark circles beneath his eyes suggesting sleepless nights, but otherwise unharmed. "I was beginning to worry," she said as he dismounted, trying to keep her tone light. Wade's expression was grim as he secured his horse. Had reason to be cautious. Blackwood's men arrived in the area yesterday. 2 of them came to the ranch, asking questions. Fear shot through Sophia. They found you?
How?
Just making the rounds of local properties, Wade assured her, following her into the cabin. Nothing to suggest they know you're here. I played the part of the unsociable rancher with no interest in strangers' business. Don't think they were particularly impressed with my hospitality. Despite his attempt at humor, Sophia could see tension in the set of his shoulders, the tightness around his mouth. There's more, she guessed. What aren't you telling me? Wade sighed, removing his hat and running a hand through hair that looked like it had been subjected to that gesture many times in recent days. I heard from Marcus. He made contact with his mother and visited your sister at the hospital. Sophia's heart leaped. Nancy? How is she? Recovering, but slowly. The knife wound was serious, punctured her lung. She's conscious now, but weak. Mrs. Fletcher has been visiting her daily, bringing food to supplement the hospital fare. Relief warred with renewed anxiety in Sophia's chest. And Vernon? Is he? Has he tried to? He's visited several times, playing the role of concerned family friend, Wade confirmed, his mouth twisting with disgust. Always brings flowers, makes a show of concern for the hospital staff. According to Marcus, he's cultivating the image of a heartbroken suitor whose intended bride fled after a tragic attack that injured her sister. Bile rose in Sophia's throat. He's turning everyone against me, making me look guilty. Not everyone, Wade corrected. Mrs. Fletcher isn't fooled. She told Marcus she never trusted Blackwood, thought his interest in you seemed obsessive rather than genuine. And according to her, your sister became agitated when he visited, though she was too weak to speak much. Sophia paced the small confines of the cabin, her mind racing. Nancy knows the truth. If she recovers enough to tell it. She won't get the chance, Wade said bluntly. Not if Blackwood has his way. Marcus overheard 2 of his men discussing plans to move her once she's stronger, supposedly to recuperate at Blackwood's country house, where she'd be more comfortable. Horror washed through Sophia. She'd never be seen again, she whispered. Wade nodded grimly. That would be my assessment as well. When? Sophia demanded. How long do we have? Doctor says she won't be fit to move for at least another week, possibly 2. We have that long to figure out how to get her away safely. Sophia sank onto a chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the task. Getting to Nancy meant returning to Helena, risking capture by Vernon and his men, somehow extracting her sister from a guarded hospital. And then... what? Where could 2 hunted women go that Vernon's influence and money couldn't reach? As if reading her thoughts, Wade pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket and spread it on the table. Marcus provided this map of the hospital and surrounding streets. He's marked the room where Nancy is recovering, noted which entrances are monitored when guards change. Sophia stared at him. You're planning a rescue? We are, Wade corrected. Unless you've developed a sudden fondness for this cabin and want to spend the rest of your days hiding in the mountains. Despite everything, a startled laugh escaped Sophia. I think I've had enough of running and hiding to last a lifetime. Wade's expression softened slightly, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. Good. Because what I'm proposing isn't without risk, but it's better than waiting for Blackwood to find you or harm your sister. For the next hour, they bent over the map together, Wade outlining a plan that was both audacious and terrifying in its simplicity. Marcus had already made arrangements with a sympathetic nurse who was distantly related to Mrs. Fletcher. On the appointed night, Sophia would enter the hospital disguised as an aide bringing medication to the night ward. Wade and Marcus would be waiting with a wagon behind the hospital service entrance. If all went according to plan, they could have Nancy away and hidden before Vernon's men realized she was missing. And then what? Sophia asked, the practical question cutting through her initial surge of hope. Where do we go? Vernon won't stop looking. I have a property, Wade said, something hesitant entering his voice for the first time. A small ranch near the Colorado border. Purchased it years ago as an investment. Never developed it much. It's remote, self-sufficient with good water and grazing. Few neighbors, and those mind their own business. You'd leave Cottonwood Ranch? Sophia asked, stunned by the implication. Your home? Your livelihood? Wade's eyes held hers steadily. Cottonwood is well established. My foreman Jim Hawkins has been with me 15 years. He can run it with minimal direction for me. The Colorado property needs attention, development. Been meaning to spend more time there for years. Sophia studied his face, searching for signs of reluctance or resentment at the upheaval her presence had caused in his ordered life. She found none, only that same steady resolve that had characterized his every interaction with her. Why? She asked softly. Why would you do all this for strangers? Wade was silent for a long moment, his gaze dropping to the map between them. When he looked up again, something had shifted in his expression of vulnerability she hadn't seen before. Told you about my sister Caroline, he said, his voice rougher than usual. Didn't tell you I was there the night her husband killed her. Heard her screams from the barn where I was helping birth a foal. By the time I reached the house. He broke off, the muscles in his jaw working. I was too late. He was gone, she was dying. Made me promise to look after their boy, my nephew Noah. Sophia's heart contracted painfully in her chest. Wade, I'm so sorry. He shook his head, dismissing her sympathy. Noah's 20 now, studying medicine back east. Safe. But I never found the man who killed my sister. He disappeared, started a new life somewhere else, probably found another woman to terrorize. His eyes, when they met hers, burned with quiet intensity. I couldn't save Caroline. Maybe I can help save you and Nancy. The raw honesty of his words hung in the air between them, creating a connection that transcended their brief acquaintance. Sophia felt tears prick at her eyes, not of fear or sorrow this time, but of something deeper recognition, perhaps of finding an unexpected ally in a world that had shown her little kindness. I don't know how to thank you, she said finally. Live, Wade replied simply. Be free of Blackwood and men like him. That's thanks enough. Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary, and Sophia felt something stir deep within her, a dangerous warmth she'd thought Vernon's brutality had extinguished forever. She looked away first, returning her attention to the map with deliberate focus. When do we move? She asked, her voice steadier than she felt. 3 days, Wade replied. Marcus needs time to finalize arrangements with the nurse, and I need to put things in order at the ranch. We'll leave at dawn. Travel to a safe house Marcus has arranged on the outskirts of Helena. You'll rest there until nightfall, then make your way to the hospital. The plan was set in motion, each detail carefully considered and rechecked. When Wade finally left to return to his ranch, the night was well advanced, stars scattered like diamond dust across the velvet sky. Sophia stood on the porch long after he'd disappeared from view, her mind filled not with fear of the dangerous days ahead, but with the memory of pain and purpose in a pair of turquoise eyes. For the first time since fleeing Helena, she allowed herself to contemplate a future beyond mere survival, a future where safety might be possible, where trust might be rebuilt, where the constant looking over her shoulder might eventually cease. It was a dangerous indulgence, perhaps, but as she returned to the warmth of the cabin, Sophia found herself unwilling to relinquish this newfound hope. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation and mounting tension. Wade visited daily, bringing supplies for their journey and updates from Marcus. Sophia sewed a second dress from the muslin fabric, strengthened by proper meals and rest, but still anxious about the dangers that lay ahead. Each night, She fell into restless sleep filled with dreams of Nancy's pale face and Vernon's vengeful rage. On the morning of their departure, Sophia rose before dawn, packing her few belongings with trembling hands. The small cabin had become a haven in the week and a half she'd spent there, its rough-hewn walls offering more security than she'd known since fleeing Helena. Leaving it felt like stepping from solid ground onto shifting sand, but the alternative remaining hidden while Vernon moved Nancy beyond reach was unthinkable. Wade arrived as the first pale light of dawn crept over the eastern mountains. He looked different, somehow freshly shaven, his usually windblown hair neatly combed beneath his hat. He wore a dark jacket over his usual work shirt, and a gunbelt with a holstered Colt revolver hung at his hip. "Ready?" he asked, accepting the small bundle containing her belongings. Sophia nodded, her throat too tight for words. Together they secured the cabin, leaving it as they'd found it, erasing evidence of her stay. The horses Wade had brought his own gelding, and the gentle bay mare Sophia had ridden before stood patiently beside the lean-to, saddled and ready. The journey to Helena took most of the day, Wade leading them along back trails and little-used paths to avoid main roads where they might be seen. They spoke little, each lost in thoughts of what lay ahead. By late afternoon, they reached the outskirts of the city, where Marcus Fletcher waited at a modest clapboard house set back from the road. Marcus proved to be a lean, weathered man of about 50, with shrewd eyes that missed nothing and a quiet manner that immediately put Sophia at ease. He'd arranged everything as planned, the nurse's uniform hanging ready, a light meal prepared, and most importantly, confirmation that Nancy was still at the hospital, her condition improving steadily. Blackwood visits daily, Marcus reported as they ate at the small kitchen table. Always between 4 and 5 in the afternoon, never stays more than half an hour. His men are more of a concern too, posted near the hospital entrance at all times, rotating every 6 hours. And inside? Wade asked, studying the hospital map spread between their plates. One man, posing as a concerned family friend, stationed in the corridor outside her room, Marcus confirmed. But Nurse Jenkins, my mother's cousin, says he's less vigilant at night. Often dozes in his chair after midnight. Sophia listened intently, memorizing details of the plan. At 11 o'clock, she would enter through the hospital's side entrance, dressed as a nurse bringing medicine to the night ward. Marcus had obtained a small vial of laudanum that would be administered to Vernon's guard if necessary. Once she reached Nancy's room, she would have approximately 15 minutes to get her sister ready and move her to the service stairs at the end of the corridor. Wade and Marcus would be waiting with a wagon at the service entrance, ready to depart as soon as the sisters emerged. "And if something goes wrong?" Sophia asked, voicing the fear that had been growing with each passing hour. "If Nancy isn't strong enough to walk, or if the guard raises an alarm?" Wade and Marcus exchanged glances. "I'll be inside as well," Wade said, posing as an orderly. "If there's trouble, I'll be close enough to help." The thought of Wade potentially facing Vernon's men who likely wouldn't hesitate to use deadly force sent a chill through Sophia. "I can't ask you to risk that," she protested. "Not asking," Wade replied, his tone brooking no argument. "It's decided." As dusk settled over Helena, Sophia changed into the nurse's uniform Marcus had provided, a severe blue dress with white apron and cap. The outfit was slightly large, but in the dim lighting of the hospital corridors, the disguise should be sufficient. Her hair was pinned tightly beneath the cap, her face scrubbed clean of any cosmetics that might have enhanced her natural features. When she emerged from the bedroom, Wade was waiting in the small parlor, similarly transformed. Gone were his rancher's clothes, replaced by the plain uniform of a hospital orderly. The change of attire did little to disguise his fundamental nature, the quiet strength, the watchful eyes, the contained power in his lean frame, but it might be enough to allow him to move through the hospital without attracting undue attention. Their eyes met across the room, mutual recognition of the risks ahead creating a current of tension between them. Wade crossed to stand before her, his expression grave. "If anything happens," he said quietly, "if we're separated or things go wrong, the plan remains the same. Get Nancy out, get to the wagon. Marcus will take you to the Colorado property if I can't." "Nothing will go wrong," Sophia insisted, as much to convince herself as him. "We'll all leave together." Wade's mouth curved in a ghost of a smile. "Of course we will." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, pressing it into her palm. "But just in case." Sophia looked down at a small brass key, worn smooth with age. "What is this?" "Key to the Colorado ranch house," Wade explained. "Property's called Whispering Pines. Anyone in the area can direct you to it. House isn't much, but it's solid. There's a strongbox beneath the floorboards in the main bedroom, enough money to see you and Nancy through until I arrive." Emotion tightened Sophia's throat at this tangible evidence of his trust and foresight. She closed her fingers around the key, its weight both a reassurance and a burden. "I won't need it," she said firmly, "but thank you." The hours until 11 o'clock passed with excruciating slowness. Sophia tried to rest, but found sleep impossible, her mind racing with all the ways their plan could fail. What if Nancy was too weak to move? What if Vernon himself was at the hospital? What if they were recognized, captured, separated? By the time Marcus signaled it was time to leave, Sophia's nerves were stretched to breaking point. The short journey to the hospital in Marcus's covered wagon seemed to take both an eternity and no time at all. Before she was ready, they were pulling into an alley behind the brick building, and Wade was helping her down from the wagon, his hands strong and steady at her waist. "Remember," he said softly, "room 212, East Corridor. I'll be nearby as soon as I can." Sophia nodded, unable to speak past the knot of fear in her throat. She straightened her borrowed cap, took a deep breath, and stepped toward the hospital's side entrance, forcing her trembling legs to move with the confident stride of someone who belonged there. The hospital at night was dimly lit and eerily quiet, the corridors illuminated by gas lamps turned low to allow patients to sleep. Sophia kept her head down, nodding briefly to the few staff members she passed, her heart hammering so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. The small medicine basket looped over her arm provided both prop and comfort, something to hold on to as she navigated the unfamiliar building. Finding the East Corridor proved easier than expected, clear signage guiding her through the labyrinthine hallways. As she approached room 212, Sophia slowed, observing the corridor ahead. Just as Marcus had described, a man sat in a chair outside one of the doors, his chin drooping toward his chest as he dozed. Vernon's guard, recognizable from his city clothes and the telltale bulge of a concealed weapon beneath his jacket. Sophia's first instinct was to turn and flee, but Nancy was just beyond that door. Nancy, who had tried to defend her and paid a terrible price. Drawing on reserves of courage she hadn't known she possessed, Sophia straightened her shoulders and continued forward, her steps purposeful, her expression carefully neutral. The guard stirred as she approached, blinking sleepily. "Evening, nurse," he mumbled, straightening in his chair. "Good evening," Sophia replied, keeping her voice low and her face averted. "I've brought medication for the patient." The guard frowned slightly. "At this hour?" "Doctor was already in earlier." Sophia's heart stuttered, but she forced a smile. "Special instructions. The patient has been having trouble sleeping." For a moment, she thought he might challenge her further, might look more closely at her face and recognize the woman his employer was hunting. Then he yawned, waving her toward the door. "Go on, then. But be quick about it. Patient needs rest." Sophia nodded, reaching for the door handle with a hand she willed not to tremble. The room beyond was small and dimly lit, a single gas lamp burning low beside the narrow bed. And there, propped against white pillows, was Nancy, her face pale and drawn, her dark hair braided over one shoulder, her slender body looking impossibly fragile beneath the hospital blankets. Sophia closed the door quietly behind her, her heart constricting at the sight of her sister's diminished state. "Nancy," she whispered, moving swiftly to the bedside. "It's me. It's Sophia." Nancy's eyes flew open, widening with disbelief and then flooding with tears. "Sophia," she breathed, her voice weak but clear. "Is it really you? They said you'd run away, that you'd left me." "Never," Sophia said fiercely, clasping her sister's thin hand. "I'd never leave you willingly. Vernon's men were chasing me. I had to run to draw them away from you. I thought—" Her voice broke. "I thought you might be dead." Nancy's fingers tightened around hers. "I almost was. The doctor said another inch to the left, and the knife would have pierced my heart instead of my lung." Her eyes darkened with remembered fear. "Vernon was so angry when you defied him. I've never seen anyone change so completely, one moment the charming suitor, the next." "I know," Sophia said, glancing anxiously at the door. "And I'll explain everything later, but right now we need to go. Vernon plans to move you to his country house as soon as you're stronger. If that happens—" Understanding dawned in Nancy's eyes. "We'd never escape," she finished. "But Sophia, I'm not sure I can walk. My strength—" "I'll help you," Sophia promised. "I have friends waiting to get us away from here, somewhere Vernon can't find us. Can you try? For me?" Nancy's jaw set with determination, the same stubborn expression she'd worn as a child when facing a difficult task. "I can try." Together, they worked quickly to dress Nancy in the simple clothes Sophia had brought: a loose dress that would fit over her bandages, a shawl to protect against the night chill. Each movement clearly caused Nancy pain, but she stifled her gasps, her eyes fixed on the door with visible apprehension. "What about him?" she whispered, nodding toward the guard outside. Sophia hesitated, fingering the vial of laudanum in her pocket. She'd hoped to avoid using it, knowing the risk of discovery would increase if the guard was found unconscious. "We'll try to slip past while he's dozing," she decided. "If that fails—" A soft knock at the door interrupted her, sending panic coursing through her veins. Had the guard become suspicious? Had someone reported an unfamiliar nurse? Sophia positioned herself between Nancy and the door, prepared to fight if necessary. The door opened a crack, and Wade's face appeared, his expression tense but controlled. "Everything all right?" he asked quietly. "We need to move now. There's been a complication." Relief at his appearance quickly gave way to fresh anxiety. "What complication?" "Blackwood's in the building," Wade reported grimly. "Arrived for an unscheduled late visit. Currently speaking with the night doctor, but he'll be heading this way soon." Sophia's blood turned to ice. "Vernon's here? Now." "We need to go," Wade repeated, slipping into the room and closing the door behind him. His eyes assessed Nancy's condition quickly. "Can you walk, miss?" Nancy nodded, though her face was pale with pain and effort. "Not quickly, but yes." "Guard?" Sophia asked. "Taken care of," Wade replied. At her questioning look, he added, "Sleeping soundly, courtesy of a mug of doctored coffee. He'll wake with a headache, but no worse." He moved to Nancy's side, offering his arm for support. "I'm Wade O'Malley," he said, his voice gentling as he addressed her. "A friend of your sister's. We're going to get you somewhere safe, but we need to move quickly and quietly." "Can you manage that?" Nancy nodded again, determination overriding pain in her young face. "For Sophia, I can do anything," she said simply. Something flickered in Wade's eyes: approval, perhaps, or recognition of the bond between the sisters. "Then let's go," he said, supporting Nancy as she stood on shaky legs. "Service stairs are at the end of the corridor. Marcus is waiting with the wagon." The journey from the room to the stairwell was the longest of Sophia's life, each step measured and careful, each sound magnified by fear of discovery. Nancy leaned heavily on Wade, her face growing paler with each step, but she made no complaint, her jaw set with the same stubborn determination Sophia remembered from childhood challenges. They had almost reached the service door when voices echoed from the main corridor, one cultured and commanding, unmistakably Vernon's. Sophia froze, terror washing through her in a paralyzing wave. Nancy's fingers dug into her arm, her eyes wide with matching fear. "Keep moving," Wade urged softly, his steady presence the only thing preventing Sophia from succumbing to panic. Almost there. The service stairs were narrow and poorly lit, designed for hospital staff rather than patients. Descending them with Nancy's weakened condition proved challenging, but the alternative discovery by Vernon lent urgency to their movements. By the time they reached the ground floor, Nancy was trembling with exhaustion, her breathing labored. "Just a little further," Sophia encouraged, though her own strength was flagging under the weight of fear and responsibility. The service entrance opened onto the alley, where Marcus waited with the wagon, its canvas cover providing concealment for their escape. He helped lift Nancy into the back, where blankets had been arranged to create a makeshift bed. "Any trouble?" he asked Wade as Sophia climbed in beside her sister. "Blackwood's in the building," Wade reported tersely. "We need to move now." Marcus nodded, his expression grim. "Main roads will be watched. We'll take the river route out of town, then circle back to the safe house. You riding or coming in the wagon?" Wade glanced at Sophia, still supporting Nancy among the blankets. "Wagon," he decided. "You drive. I'll keep watch." The journey through Helena's darkened streets was a nightmare of shadows and whispered warnings, each intersection bringing fresh anxiety about possible pursuers. Sophia held Nancy close, trying to shield her from the worst jolts as the wagon traversed rough alleys and back streets. Wade remained vigilant, one hand near his holstered revolver, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. By the time they reached the safe house, Nancy was semi-conscious, the exertion having depleted her limited reserves. Wade carried her inside, laying her gently on the bed in the small back room while Marcus secured the wagon and horses. "She needs rest," Sophia said, pressing a cool cloth to her sister's forehead. "The journey has been too much for her." "She'll have rest," Wade assured her. "But not here. As soon as Marcus returns, we need to move again. Helena isn't safe once Blackwood discovers Nancy missing. He'll tear the city apart looking for her." "But she can't travel in this condition," Sophia protested. "Look at her." Wade's expression softened with genuine concern. "I know it's not ideal. But we have a doctor waiting at a way station about 15 miles south. He'll check her condition, provide medicine for the journey. After that, we'll travel at whatever pace she can manage." Sophia wanted to argue further, to insist that Nancy needed a proper bed and complete rest, but she knew Wade was right. Remaining in Helena meant eventual discovery, and that would be far worse for Nancy than a difficult journey. Marcus returned minutes later, his expression tense. "We need to go," he said without preamble. "There's movement in the streets, men on horseback, searching." "Blackwood discovered she's missing," Wade concluded grimly. "Sooner than I'd hoped." They moved with swift efficiency, Wade carrying Nancy to the wagon while Sophia gathered their few belongings. This time, Marcus had arranged a different vehicle, a covered farm wagon with a false bottom beneath sacks of grain, creating a hidden compartment where the sisters could conceal themselves if necessary. The next hours passed in a blur of tension and vigilance, the wagon following little-used farm tracks south out of Helena. Twice they were forced to hide when riders approached. Nancy and Sophia pressed into the cramped hidden compartment while Wade and Marcus posed as farmers transporting grain to a southern market. By dawn, they had reached the way station, a small, isolated farmhouse operated by a taciturn man named Jennings who asked no questions and offered clean beds and hot food without comment. The doctor Wade had arranged was waiting, a grave older man who examined Nancy thoroughly before providing medication to ease her pain and strengthen her for the journey ahead. "She's young and naturally strong," he told Sophia privately after the examination. "The wound is healing cleanly, which is the most important thing. With proper care and rest, she should recover fully." It was the first truly good news Sophia had received in what felt like an eternity. She thanked the doctor profusely, clinging to his words like a lifeline as they prepared for the next stage of their journey. Marcus would return to Helena, monitoring Blackwood's movements and sending word if danger approached. Wade would escort the sisters to his Colorado property, traveling slowly to accommodate Nancy's condition. The journey would take at least 2 weeks, following back routes and stopping frequently to allow Nancy to rest. As they prepared to depart the following morning, Sophia found Marcus alone on the small porch, smoking a pipe as he watched the sun rise over the distant mountains. "I never properly thanked you," she said, drawing her shawl tighter against the morning chill. "For helping us. For risking yourself." Marcus tamped his pipe thoughtfully. "No thanks needed," he said after a moment. "Wade's a good man, best I know. If he says you're worth helping, that's good enough for me." He glanced at her sideways. "Besides, my mother speaks highly of you. Says you were the most talented seamstress she ever employed." Sophia smiled at the mention of Mrs. Fletcher. "You miss her. She was kind to us when few others were." "She's a good judge of character," Marcus observed. "Always has been." He knocked the ashes from his pipe and straightened. "Take care of Wade," he added unexpectedly. "He acts like nothing touches him, but that's not true. Man's been alone too long, carrying too much." Before Sophia could respond to this surprising statement, the door opened behind them and Wade emerged, his expression softening briefly at the sight of her. "Nancy's awake," he told her. "Asking for you." The journey to Colorado was long and arduous, each day bringing new challenges and unexpected moments of beauty. They traveled mostly at night at first, keeping to lesser-known trails and avoiding towns whenever possible. During daylight hours, they rested in secluded locations, abandoned homesteads, sheltered groves, once even a cave beside a clear mountain stream. Nancy grew stronger with each passing day, her natural resilience asserting itself despite the difficult conditions. By the end of the first week, she could walk short distances unassisted, and her appetite had returned, a good sign according to the doctor's instructions. As the distance from Helena increased, the tension that had been Sophia's constant companion began to ease slightly. They were still vigilant, still careful, but the immediate fear of pursuit gradually receded. This cautious optimism allowed her to notice things she'd been too frightened to appreciate before: the breathtaking beauty of mountain sunrises, the peaceful rhythm of campfire evenings, the unexpected comfort of Wade's quiet presence. He was unfailingly patient and resourceful, finding the safest routes, the most sheltered campsites, always putting the sisters' comfort before his own. Sophia watched him with Nancy, noting his gentle competence as he changed her bandages or helped her from the wagon, the way he told quiet, amusing stories to distract her during difficult stretches of the journey. These observations added layers to her understanding of the man who had inexplicably become their protector. One evening, as they camped beside a small lake in the shadow of pine-covered mountains, Sophia found Wade sitting alone on a fallen log, staring out at the water turned golden by the setting sun. Nancy was already asleep in the wagon, exhausted from their day's travel, but steadily improving. "May I join you?" Sophia asked, approaching with 2 cups of coffee. Wade glanced up, a smile warming his weathered features. "Always," he said, accepting one of the cups. "How's your sister?" "Sleeping peacefully," Sophia replied, settling beside him on the log. "Her color is better today. I think the mountain air agrees with her." They sat in companionable silence for several minutes, watching as the sunset painted the lake in shades of amber and rose. Birds called to one another from the surrounding forest, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote's lonely howl echoed across the water. "It's beautiful here," Sophia said finally. "Peaceful. I'd forgotten such places existed." Wade nodded, his eyes on the distant mountains. "That's why I bought the Colorado property," he said. "First time I saw those mountains, something in me recognized them as home. Took 15 years to make Cottonwood profitable enough to consider developing a second ranch, but I never forgot that feeling." "Yet you've never lived there?" Sophia asked. "Visited a few times over the years. Built the house, dug a well, fenced some pasture. But there was always something that needed attention at Cottonwood." He paused, sipping his coffee. "Maybe I was waiting for the right reason to make the move." The words hung between them, laden with unspoken meaning. Sophia studied his profile, struck by how familiar it had become in the relatively short time she'd known him. The strong line of his jaw, the crinkles at the corners of his eyes, the way his mouth curved slightly when he was thinking, these details had been imprinted on her consciousness without her realizing it. "Why are you really doing this, Wade?" she asked softly. "And don't say it's because of your sister." "That's part of it, I know, but not all." Wade was silent for so long that Sophia thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, reflective. "When I found you in my barn that night, you reminded me of something I'd forgotten: what it means to fight for your life, for your future. I've been existing these past years, not really living. Running a successful ranch, respected in the community, but alone. Empty." He turned to look at her directly. "You woke something in me, Sophia. Something I thought was long dead." The simple honesty of his words stole Sophia's breath. In Vernon's world, men spoke in elaborate compliments designed to manipulate and control. Wade's straightforward declaration, offered without expectation or demand, was so different it left her momentarily speechless. "I don't know what to say," she admitted finally. Wade smiled slightly. "Nothing needs saying. Just wanted you to know the truth." He stood, stretching his tall frame. "We should get some rest. Long day tomorrow if we want to reach the Colorado border by nightfall." As he walked back toward their camp, Sophia remained on the log, watching the last light fade from the water, her heart beating with a strange mixture of fear and something that felt dangerously like hope. 2 days later, they crossed into Colorado territory, the landscape gradually changing from dense forests to more open country, with stunning vistas of the Rocky Mountains dominating the western horizon. Nancy was strong enough now to sit beside Sophia on the wagon seat for short periods, her face brightening with each new view. "It's so beautiful," she marveled, watching an eagle soar above a distant ridge. "I never imagined places like this existed." Sophia smiled, grateful to see her sister's natural enthusiasm returning. "Wait until you see Wade's ranch," she said. "He says it's in a valley with a river running through it, surrounded by pine forests." Nancy glanced at her curiously. "You care for him, don't you?" she asked, her voice low enough that Wade, riding ahead to scout their route, couldn't hear. Heat rose in Sophia's cheeks. "He saved our lives," she deflected. "Of course I care about him." "That's not what I meant," Nancy persisted, a knowing smile playing at her lips. "I've seen how you look at him when you think no one is watching, and how he looks at you when he thinks the same." "Nancy," Sophia protested, though without real heat. "It's not. We're not." "Not yet, perhaps," Nancy conceded. "But I hope someday you might be. After Vernon, I worried you'd never trust a man again. Wade is different, though, isn't he?" Sophia couldn't deny it. "Yes," she admitted softly. "He's different. But that doesn't mean—" She trailed off, uncertain how to articulate the complex emotions Wade stirred in her. Fear and attraction, gratitude and wariness, all tangled together in a knot she couldn't unravel. Nancy squeezed her hand. "Just don't close your heart completely," she advised, wisdom beyond her years in her young face. "Not all men are like Vernon." Some are worth the risk. Before Sophia could respond, Wade returned, cantering toward their wagon with news that they were nearing the final stretch of their journey. By nightfall, they would reach Whispering Pines. The anticipation of arrival lent energy to their final day of travel. Even Nancy seemed reinvigorated, sitting up for longer periods and asking questions about the ranch and its surroundings. Wade answered patiently, describing the property in detail: the stone and timber house built on a gentle rise overlooking the valley, the clear stream that ran year-round, the stands of pine and aspen that gave the ranch its name. "It needs work," he cautioned. "Been unoccupied for a few years, except for occasional visits from a caretaker. But it's solid, and the land is good." As the sun began its westward descent, they crested a hill, and Wade reined his horse to a stop, waiting for the wagon to catch up. When Sophia halted the team beside him, he gestured toward the valley spread below them. "Whispering Pines," he said simply. Sophia and Nancy both gasped at the vista before them. The valley was even more beautiful than Wade had described, a perfect natural bowl cradled by forest-covered hills, with a silver ribbon of river winding through its center. The ranch house stood on a small rise near the southern end, its stone chimney and timber walls weathered to a silvery gray that blended harmoniously with the landscape. Nearby stood a barn, corral, and several smaller outbuildings, all constructed with the same attention to harmony with the natural surroundings. "It's perfect," Nancy breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. Wade's expression held a mixture of pride and something deeper, a sense of homecoming, perhaps, or fulfillment of a long-held dream. "It will be," he said, "with some care and attention." The final approach to the ranch took them along a well-maintained trail that wound through stands of aspen, their leaves shimmering gold in the late afternoon light. As they drew closer, Sophia noted signs that the property hadn't been entirely neglected. The fences were in good repair, the yard free of weeds, the windows of the house clean and unbroken. "You mentioned a caretaker?" she asked Wade as they neared the house. He nodded. "Old Joe Fielding. Lives in a cabin about a mile downstream. Checks on the place every few weeks, makes sure nothing falls into disrepair. Good man, keeps to himself. He'll be a helpful neighbor, but won't intrude." The house itself was larger than Sophia had expected, a substantial two-story structure built of native stone and timber, with a wide porch wrapping around two sides and numerous windows to capture the spectacular views. Inside, it was simply but solidly furnished, with none of the feminine touches that had characterized Wade's mother's influence at Cottonwood Ranch, but comfortable nonetheless. "It's wonderful," Sophia said sincerely as Wade showed them through the main rooms, a large central living area with a stone fireplace, a kitchen with a cast-iron stove, a study lined with empty bookshelves, and 4 bedrooms upstairs. "Far more than we could have hoped for." "You and Nancy take the 2 rooms at the east end," Wade instructed. "They get the morning sun. I'll use the room at the opposite end. That leaves one for guests, should we ever have any." The casual "we" wasn't lost on Sophia, but she didn't comment on it, focusing instead on getting Nancy settled. Despite her improved condition, the final day's journey had taxed her strength, and she was pale with exhaustion by the time Sophia helped her into the larger of the 2 bedrooms. "Rest now," Sophia urged, removing Nancy's shoes and helping her into the bed. "We're safe here. You can sleep as long as you need." Nancy's eyes were already closing, but she caught Sophia's hand before surrendering to sleep. "We made it," she murmured. "Because of him. Because of Wade." "Yes," Sophia agreed softly. "Because of Wade." When she returned downstairs, she found him in the kitchen, unpacking provisions and lighting the stove. "Nancy's asleep," she reported. "The journey was exhausting for her, but I think she'll recover quickly now that we're settled." Wade nodded, his movements efficient as he arranged coffee, flour, sugar, and other basics on the kitchen shelves. "There's a doctor in the settlement about 20 miles east," he said. I'll ride over tomorrow, see if he'll come check on her. We should have a professional opinion on her recovery. Always thinking ahead, Sophia observed, moving to help him with the unpacking. Their hands brushed as they both reached for the same sack of coffee, and a jolt of awareness shot through her at the brief contact. She withdrew quickly, busying herself with arranging plates on a nearby shelf. Wade paused, watching her with those perceptive eyes that seemed to see more than she intended to reveal. "It's been a long journey," he said finally. "You should rest too. I'll finish here." But Sophia shook her head. "I've been sitting in that wagon all day. What I need is to move, to be useful." She met his gaze directly. "This is your home, but you've opened it to us. The least I can do is help make it comfortable for all of us." A slow smile spread across Wade's face, not the brief, restrained expression she'd grown accustomed to, but something warmer, more open. "Our home now," he corrected gently. "For as long as you and Nancy want it to be." The words hung between them, filled with possibility and unspoken questions. Sophia felt herself at a crossroads, one path leading back to caution and emotional distance, the other towards something both frightening and exhilarating in its potential. Before she could respond, a knock at the door broke the moment. Wade's hand moved instinctively to his holster as he strode to the window, peering out cautiously. "It's Joe," he reported, relaxing visibly. "The caretaker must have seen our arrival." Joe Fielding proved to be a grizzled man of indeterminate age, with a weathered face that had seen decades of mountain winters and a quietly respectful manner that immediately put Sophia at ease. He declined their invitation to stay for supper, but promised to return the following day with fresh venison and information about their nearest neighbors. "Folks around here mind their business," he assured them before departing. "Nobody asks too many questions. You'll fit right in, Mr. O'Malley." After he'd gone, Sophia and Wade prepared a simple meal from their provisions, working together in the kitchen with an ease that belied their short acquaintance. They ate at the sturdy oak table, the lantern light casting a warm glow over the room as darkness settled outside. The normalcy of the moment, sharing a meal in a proper house, with no immediate threat looming, seemed almost dreamlike after weeks of danger and flight. "What happens now?" Sophia asked as they cleared the dishes. "What's the plan?" Wade considered the question, leaning against the counter. "First priority is getting Nancy fully recovered. Then we develop the ranch. There's good grazing land to the north that could support a decent herd. The stream provides water year-round, and there's enough timber on the property for building corrals, expanding the barn if needed." "And Vernon?" Sophia pressed. "Do we just wait? Hope he eventually gives up looking for us?" Wade's expression hardened. "Marcus will keep us informed of Blackwood's movements. If he ventures this far from his territory, we'll know in advance. But my guess is he won't. Men like him rely on others to do their dirty work, and his influence doesn't extend this far south." Sophia wanted to believe him, but fear had been her companion for too long to be easily dismissed. "He's not a man who accepts defeat," she said quietly. "And I took something he considered his property." "Me." "You were never his property," Wade said, an edge of anger in his voice. "No matter what he believed." "I know that," Sophia agreed. "But Vernon doesn't. In his mind, I still belong to him, and he to me. It's unsettling to think of him out there, searching." Wade moved closer, not touching her, but near enough that she could feel the reassuring solidity of his presence. "We'll be vigilant," he promised. "But we can't live in fear forever, Sophia. At some point, we have to start building rather than running." The simple wisdom of his words resonated within her. She'd been running since that terrible night in Helena, her entire focus on escape and survival. The thought of stopping, of planting roots and looking toward a future, was both terrifying and exhilarating. "I don't know if I remember how to do anything but run," she admitted softly. Wade's eyes held hers, steady and certain. You will, he assured her. One day at a time. The following weeks established a rhythm to life at Whispering Pines. The Dr. Wade summoned pronounced Nancy's recovery progressing well, prescribing continued rest and gradually increasing activity. Wade threw himself into ranch work, repairing fences, assessing grazing areas, and planning for the herd of cattle he intended to purchase before winter. Sophia took charge of the house, transforming it from a bachelor's sparse dwelling into a proper home. With Nancy's help as she grew stronger, they planted a kitchen garden, sewed curtains for the windows from fabric purchased on Wade's infrequent trips to the settlement, and added small touches that made the house feel lived in and cared for. As September gave way to October, the aspen trees turned brilliant gold, and the air carried the first hint of winter's approach. Nancy was fully recovered now, her natural vitality restored, though a small scar on her chest served as a permanent reminder of Vernon's violence. She had embraced ranch life with enthusiasm, learning to ride from Wade and helping Sophia with household tasks while contributing her own artistic talents to their home's decoration. One crisp afternoon, Sophia stood on the porch, watching as Wade and Nancy returned from a ride, their laughter carrying across the yard. The sight of them together, Nancy's dark head thrown back in mirth, Wade's face relaxed in a way it rarely was around others, filled Sophia with a complicated mixture of joy and apprehension. Joy because these two people she cared for most in the world had formed a genuine bond of friendship. Apprehension because their happiness seemed so fragile, so vulnerable to the shadow that still haunted her thoughts. Wade spotted her on the porch and raised his hand in greeting, his smile widening. In the weeks since their arrival at Whispering Pines, something had shifted between them, a gradual warming, a cautious exploration of the connection that had been present since that first night in his barn. They hadn't spoken of it directly, both seemingly content to let it develop at its own pace, but Sophia was increasingly aware of the currents that flowed between them during shared meals, chance touches, quiet conversations by the fire. "Sophia," Nancy called, dismounting with the easy grace she'd acquired under Wade's tutelage. "You should have come with us. The North Valley is spectacular. All the aspens turned gold, and we saw a herd of elk near the stream. You would have loved it." "Next time, I promise," Sophia replied, smiling at her sister's enthusiasm. As they approached, she felt Wade's gaze resting on her, a familiar heat prickling her skin. Nancy walked past, animatedly recounting their ride, but Sophia caught Wade's eye as he dismounted. The unspoken bond between them felt amplified in the stillness of the moment, the air charged with potential. "You've made quite a transformation here," he said quietly, his gaze sweeping over the porch adorned with freshly planted flowers and the rustic charm that had begun to permeate the ranch. "It feels like home." Sophia nodded, her heart racing. "It is home, isn't it? For now, at least." Wade stepped closer, the distance between them narrowing. "And for whatever future we can build," he said, his voice low. The implication hung heavy in the air. Just then, a distant barking broke the moment as a lone dog appeared on the road, barreling toward them, tail wagging furiously. Nancy squealed in delight and began waving, bringing both Sophia and Wade back to the present as the dog, a scruffy mutt with a friendly disposition, bounded into the yard. "What's his name?" Nancy asked, crouching down to pet the dog, who responded eagerly. "Don't know yet," Wade admitted with a chuckle, watching Nancy and the dog bond instantly. "I figured we could decide together." Sophia felt a surge of warmth at the scene, enhanced by the sunlight filtering through the trees, golden leaves fluttering in the breeze. This was what she had longed for, a sense of normalcy, of community, of family created through love and genuine connection. As nights turned cooler and days shortened, Sophia's thoughts no longer revolved around the shadows of her past. Instead, they turned to the future she could build with Nancy and Wade, and the kindness they had shown her gave her the courage to embrace it fully. With the changing of the seasons came a growing resolve. On one particularly crisp evening, as they sat together around the fire after dinner, Sophia found the courage to address the unspoken bond between her and Wade. Nancy, sensing the gravity of the moment, excused herself to tend to some chores, leaving them alone. Turning to Wade, she took a deep breath to steady herself. "What happens now?" she asked, her heart racing as she strove to meet his gaze directly. Wade leaned back slightly, his expression serious but warm. "We keep building," he said simply. "We safeguard what we've created here. Together." Reassurance flooded through Sophia. This was the man who had stood by her side through danger, who had fought not just for her safety, but for the chance to create a better future. She knew then that hope had not been extinguished by Vernon's brutality, it had merely transformed. "Together," she echoed, feeling suffused with gratitude and newfound strength. They held each other's gaze for a long moment, the warmth of the fire casting shadows that danced around them. In that shared silence, something profound shifted between them, solidifying the connection that had been growing day by day. As she turned to tend the fire, a sense of certainty settled within her. Perhaps Whispering Pines would not just be a refuge from her past. Perhaps it was a place to heal, to grow, and to forge a new path, one filled with laughter, courage, and the indomitable spirit of family. And in that quiet moment, in the peaceful embrace of the mountains that surrounded them, Sophia knew she could embrace this new life and whatever it might hold with Wade and Nancy by her side.